What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Just wanted to remind you guys before the video starts to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you end up enjoying the video. If you have any thoughts about the stories in this video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as one of my favorite things about doing this is reading your guys' comments on the stories. Ryan, I know some people have been saying they've been getting a lot of ads recently. Unfortunately, YouTube recently changed the way they do their ads, where it automatically puts ads in certain periods of silence. So I don't really have too much control over when it does that. I'm sorry, guys, but that's just the way it is. Without further ado, though, guys, we'll just get right into the video, and I hope you guys enjoy the next 40 minutes or so of new true scary stories. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day. My family and I went on a trip to the Hawking Hills area of southern Ohio just a few weeks ago. There was a place I always wanted to visit, the abandoned ghost town, Moonville Rail Tunnel. I had never been to this area, so I didn't know what to expect. I did know it was pretty deep in the woods, though. We took a trip from our rented cabin using Google GPS to get to the location. We started driving, and it was, for lack of a better word, a real impoverished area. It had a very hills have esque ambiance. We literally only saw like 2 cars on the way there, and on the back roads as well. We got to a point where we needed to enter the forest, and were close by to the tunnel. There was a sign that said we were entering Bubblewood for a little more additional information. I drive a Mercedes that I'm lucky to have, and my husband was in the car. He's a black man with dreadlocks, and I had my 10-year-old non-verbal autistic son with me as well, and my 6-year-old daughter too. We drove down this real creepy stone road into the forest. There was nothing back there. No cars, no houses, not a single person. We did see signs. We were close, though, and pulled into the parking lot. There was a footbridge that people had built there. We walked over the footbridge and made our way toward the tunnel, which was a lot larger than I'd expected. All of a sudden, we heard this sound coming from the other side of the tunnel into the woods, away from the parking lot. A truck came driving towards us while we were on foot. The truck stopped in the middle of the tunnel. The person got out of their truck with a chainsaw. I could see it was a white guy, and his 60s. He started to walk after my family, following us everywhere we went through the tunnel. I tried to call out to him and pull some info about if he worked for the Department of Natural Resources or something, but he wouldn't say a single word. As we turned around to leave, he started to rev up his chainsaw behind us. The sound echoed throughout the tunnel. At this point, we had no cell phone service, and literally no one knew my family was out there, except for us. I was already worried my car might be sending the wrong idea to people, like we were some naive folks with money, or something. We didn't have much. We rushed back to the car to get the kids in there. Booster seats. This jumped back into his car and drove over the footbridge in his truck towards us, following us to the parking lot. Honestly, I don't even know how his truck fit onto that bridge. He stopped again and got out of his truck. About this point, I noticed there were some dusty handprints on my car. I asked my husband if they were his. We compared his hand and my son's, and they were not a match. I don't know who would have been touching the car, because we were watching the chainsaw man the entire time we were there. Needless to say, we got out of there as fast as possible. Just a few minutes later, though, I looked back into my rear view mirror only to see a bunch of dust kicking up behind us. There he is. He had driven pretty fast on the stone road to catch up to us. There was nowhere to go in these woods. The road was basically one lane, and we still had no BS. Every time I thought we would lose him, he would turn up behind us once. Again, I was just waiting for my tires to pop on a trap or something, or for this guy to speed up and ram me off the road into a ravine. Finally, we emerged from the woods. I turned around, only to see he was still following us. We were following printed directions to get back, and I ended up making a wrong turn in all the Excitement. Surprisingly, the guy on the truck did not follow us. I turned around to go back past the stone road that went into the forest and take a different way. There was one lone house near this road, and to my surprise, I saw his truck parked right there. He had to have seen us drive into the road in the woods and taken some way back to the tunnel. I don't know if he was trying to protect the site from some graffiti or what, but that was really scary. It was like every scary movie trope rolled into one single event. Many years ago, I used to work night shift at a hotel in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina during the season. It wasn't so bad, mostly just families and stuff. We also had security on site then too. However, in the off-season, the winter months, it was quite different. The cheap weekly rates we'd offer attracted a lot of creepy people. The idea was supposed to be to make money in the off-face by renting to what's known as snowbirds, older, retired people who come down to the beach for a month or more during the winter. Things didn't always work out that way, though. The cheap rates made it possible for a less than desirable element to become long-term residents at the hotel. In my time working there, I've discovered more than my fair share of meth labs, broken up physical assaults, and even more during the winter months. Working third shift would cause me to meet some very interesting people. The colder weather meant homeless people would often wander in, get warm, and grab a cup of free coffee. I wasn't supposed to let them, but I didn't want to be cruel. I would let them grab a cup of coffee and get warm for however long they wanted, as long as they didn't cause any trouble to anyone. As you might imagine, night shift in the winter made for some pretty crazy and sometimes creepy stories. I have quite a lot, actually, but this one is one that stands out mostly because it didn't end well for me. I'd had a pretty great night up until the point this happened. I had gone to see an indie wrestling show with my best friend before work. In fact, I had agreed to come in an hour early the next night for the young lady that worked second shift in exchange for her working an hour late for me on this night so I could enjoy that wrestling show. Ironically enough, I even met Terry Funk that night, a wrestling legend known for his hardcore and bloody matches. Little did I know I was about to experience that kind of violence for real. I was supposed to arrive there at midnight due to her working over an hour for me. I normally came in at 11 o'clock. Ma'am, so that was about right. I counted the register and she briefed me on her shift as to what happened. As per usual, as she was leaving, my friend, who we'll call Andrew, pulled up out front. He worked second shift maintenance at this hotel and two other hotels our company owned. He would regularly stop by after work and go grab us some food. We would play World of Warcraft on our laptops together after eating. If business was slow on a particular day, he was getting my money and order for food and getting ready to leave. I was excited, telling him how much fun I'd had at the wrestling show and showing him my Terry Funk t-shirt I was so proud of. I was just walking into the back office to put the mutton shirt up when I heard the doorbell indicating a customer had entered. It's true what they say, ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. I had just turned around when I heard someone say something loudly. I couldn't make out what they were saying from where I was, though. As I reached the doorway, I saw Andrew fall down in front of me. Next thing I know, a man walked around the corner and smacked me in the head with a short steel pipe in his hand. I staggered in surprise and went down to one knee. The next thing I knew, he smacked me in the head with the pipe again. I could hear the other guy, who I hadn't even noticed was there until this moment, say somebody had gotten away and called the cop. They sprinted out the front door. I was able to get to my feet. I tried to call the police from my phone in the back office, but I was having issues operating it. I slammed it down in frustration. I was hurting and scared, and I was really freaking out. I realized they might come back at any moment, so I locked the door as soon as I could. I didn't know what had happened to Andrew, and that really worried me. I called 911 at about this time, as blood had started pouring down my face. I told the operator we'd been attacked, and we needed an officer and an ambulance ASAP. I then called the other hotel, we ran to let the night manager know what was going on. He thought I was messing with him at first, because when we got bored, we would often prank each other. Finally, though, I convinced him I was not joking. The cops and the ambulance pulled up. As I opened the door, it was at about this time I found out that after they'd sucker punched him and knocked him down, Andrew was able to jump over the desk and escape just as a cop happened to be driving by. We flagged down for help. I ended up in the hospital where I had to have multiple staples and stitches in my scalp, and they gave me morphine. For the pain, I had no way to get home after being treated, but the doctors and nurses took pity on me and paid for a cab home. My plan was simply to go back to work. It was December and Christmas was coming. I had 3 kids and I needed all the hours I could get. When I got back to the hotel, the guide was there with his wife, Barbara, who also worked the front desk. She was shocked to see me. She thought I would still be in the hospital. I thought in the moment that I'd only been hit in the head once after being punched, but the video which Ted was pulling for the police showed a very different story. Apparently I was really out of it, because after I went down to one knee, the 2 men had begun hitting me multiple times, over and over again. In the video, I kept trying to grab the pipe and get up for some reason. I don't even remember that, but I guess that was how I got to my feet. The man kept punching me and hitting me in the face with the pipe. That was until his friend told him Andrew had gotten away and called the cops. The 2 of them then ran out. I was in a room at the other hotel we owned and took a week off to heal. They switched me over to another property on night shift for a month, just in case. Those guys were after me in particular. We never found out why they chose to attack me so viciously, and the police suspected it might be a failed strong-armed robbery due to Andrew slipping away and me not going down, but it really shook me up. Not knowing, even though I was at our other hotel when I came back to work night shift, I was extremely nervous every time the door chimed. I tensed up. I couldn't afford to quit, though. As I said, I have 3 kids I'm supporting. They never caught the guys as far as I know. A detective stopped by about 2 months later. When I was working second, he showed me several mugshots and asked me if any of them looked familiar, but I'd never gotten a great look at them as it all happened so fast. The video was not of the best quality, unfortunately. Even so, 2 of them looked very familiar to me. I pointed them out, and he asked me how sure I was. I told him honestly. It was about 85% or so. Then he screamed at me and asked me if I wanted someone to go to jail for attempted murder on 85% certainty. I was stunned into silence. I was the victim here, being attacked for no reason, and he was yelling at me like it was my fault. I was too busy being assaulted to get a good look at them. I no longer work at that hotel or on the night shift, and I'm glad, because this is just too dangerous an area. My high school had this building that was closed down. We called it the old building, even though it really wasn't any older than any of the other buildings on campus. For some strange reason, though, it was always closed down. The doors were all boarded up and the students were forbidden to try and get into that building at all. The story that was passed down along all the students was that there was an old janitor named Mabel. He was a guy who worked in the old building. He was working late in the building one night when an escaped lunatic broke into the school. The lunatic supposedly killed Mabel by drowning him in the toilet afterwards. He took a hacksaw and hacked Mabel up into tiny pieces, then flushed him down the drain afterwards. They closed the building down because they didn't think it was right having children be taught in the same building in which such a brutal murder had taken place. Of course, as you might know, with urban legends, it doesn't just stop there. You know how kids are not exactly original. There was this idea that if you went into one of the bathrooms in the old building and made sure all the stall doors were closed, then said "Bloody Mabel" 5 times in the mirror, Mabel would climb out of the toilet and murder you, then drag you down the drain. Of course, we knew the story was not true, but guys would often dare each other to go into the old building and do this little ritual. Of course, the day came along that I was dared as well by some old rivals of mine to break into that old building and try the ritual out, unbeknownst to the Fatly, the students had long discovered a way of getting into the old building through a busted window, pretending to be brave but actually being quite nervous. I climbed in through that broken window. The old building seemed a lot like any other abandoned building you'd see around. It was quite unkempt in there. There was tons of graffiti all over the walls. Now, the law was that you were supposed to find the boys' bathroom on the east end of the bottom floor. It wasn't very difficult to find. Actually, there was a ton of bloody Mabel graffiti on the wall. Well, as much as I could see with my small flashlight. I guess I should have mentioned, it was dark out. I wasn't allowed to use a light when doing the ritual, though. I'm not particularly sure how anyone would know if I ever did, but I decided to play by the rules anyway. The middle stall door was already closed. I went over to the sink that was facing the stall. Then, with a bit of a nervous chuckle, I began to say the incantation, bloody Mabel, bloody Mabel, bloody Mabel, bloody Mabel. As anyone would, I made sure to pause for a moment before saying it for the final time with a deep breath. I said the final bloody Mabel. I stood there for half a second, expecting something really to happen. Of course, nothing did. The bit of nervousness I'd felt in the beginning went away almost instantly. I actually felt really relaxed now as I turned and walked back into the hallway, though I found myself face to face with the nastiest looking man I'd ever seen, standing there in dirty clothes, staring daggers at me right in the eyes. In shock, I fell back onto the floor. The man looked like some sort of vagrant, really dirty and unshaven. He didn't seem to have a weapon on him at all, but the sheer look on his face told me he was not pleased at seeing me there lightly. He was just a homeless man, living in the old building, wanting to stay undetected. Now, I had discovered his hiding place, and that was not good for him. I tried to get up, but when I moved, he loomed over me. I was scared. I had no idea what the man was going to do. He grabbed me and pulled me up. He shoved me against the wall. Hardy, remember, it was so hard it knocked the wind out of me. I did the only thing I could think to do. It was automatic. I didn't even have time to think about it. I used every ounce of strength I had and kneed him right in the crotch. He buckled over, but surprisingly he still didn't let go of me. I continued to knee him 2 more times. The man doubled over in pain, and I hightailed it out of the old building. My friends all noticed how disheveled I looked, and I told them someone really was in there. At first, they all thought I was just trying to scare them by claiming it was bloody Mabel, but I explained what had really happened. One of my friends went and called the police, but when the police searched the old building, they didn't find anyone else there. Me and my friends were by the busted window the whole time, and we know the guy didn't come out that way, so either he had found a different way to move in and out, or he had a really good hiding place. I mean, it must have been one of those, because I know there's no such thing as any bloody Mabel. A few winters back, I had a pretty horrible experience with a hitchhiker. I was out really late at night, having attended a holiday party for work. While I was talking with a few people there, I noticed something that caught my eye out the window. It had started snowing while we were there. I hadn't exactly expected that to happen. I drive a Mustang, which has rear-wheel drive and doesn't necessarily handle very well in the snowy weather. I had to excuse myself from the party and drive on home early. Once I got on the road, the snow began falling heavily. The visibility was extremely bad. I had to drive very slowly to keep myself from skidding around. As I was driving a little bit further up the road, though, I noticed a figure in the light of a street lamp. It seemed to be a hitchhiker of some sort. My first impulse was to just drive right past him. The only thing I wanted in that moment was to get home ASAP. As I approached closer, though, I suddenly remembered when I was younger and I used to go hitchhiking all the time. There were plenty of kind people in those days who picked me up and helped me out as well. Feeling a bit of sympathy, I pulled over and offered the man a ride. He was about the same size as me. I'm also a guy, if you hadn't figured that out yet. The man seemed vastly underdressed for being out in this kind of snowy weather. He only had on a pair of regular jeans and a jean jacket, no gloves or anything like that. As I pulled my car back onto the road, I asked the man where he was off to. At first, he didn't answer me. He just sort of looked at me extremely strangely when I asked him. Then when I asked him where I could take him, he responded very strangely, "Well, where are you going?" I wasn't exactly sure how to answer that. I was already regretting picking him up, and I simply told him I was on my way home. He replied, "Oh, where's home then?" I wasn't about to tell this complete stranger where I lived, especially not one who was acting as weird as he was. I lied to him and told him I lived somewhere else entirely than where I actually lived. I asked him again where he needed me to take him, and what he said next gives me goosebumps even today. "Oh, yeah. Well, that's where I'm going to." He smiled at me. What a coincidence. Ha! I was obviously startled at this point. I decided I would just drive him to where I thought I could safely let him out of the car, then drive off on my own. I drove him to the apartment complex I'd lied about living in. When I pulled in, I asked him which building he wanted me to drop him off at. He told me there was no need. "Just park where you normally park. I'll walk back to my place from there." I didn't know what this guy was up to, but I couldn't imagine it was going to be anything good. I figured I had to at least pretend to go along with it, though, just to get him out of my car. I pulled into a parking spot and indicated the building I claimed to live in. I did have a plan to get away from the man, but the timing would have to be perfect in order for it to work. I opened the door and took a single step out of the car. He did too. I pretended like I was going to shut my door, but I didn't quite yet when he shut his door behind him. I quickly hit the lock button, then jumped into my car and pulled the door closed. He turned around right away, clearly furious. It seemed my reservations about the man had been accurate. When he saw I'd locked him out, he started screaming and yelling at me. As I pulled out of the parking spot, he grabbed onto the passenger side view mirror and started pounding on my car as I pulled away from him. I made no attempt to try not to hit him as I saw him take a knife out of his pocket and begin stabbing at my windows. He then ran it along the side of my car, scraping the hell out of it as I slowly drove away. Luckily, I got away with nothing but a very nasty and long cut on my paint job. It cost quite a bit to fix, but at least I got away without a cut on me. When I was in elementary school, there was this really nice janitor that I really liked. Most of the other kids made fun of him, actually, but I was never sure why they did. They told stories about him and claimed that he was mentally ill or he had escaped from the crazy house or something. I think it was because he seemed a little bit off to them. He was quiet and never responded when any of the other students were talking to him. Sometimes he would just stare at people quite blankly as well. I was the type of kid, however, who hated to see people sad. I hated to see people getting picked on for no reason. So one day when I saw just how sad this was making the janitor, I decided to do something nice for him to cheer him up. I went out during recess and picked a couple of daisies. I brought them into the school and gave them to him. He took them, and I actually saw the man smile for the very first time. I also heard him speak for the very first time when he said thank you to me. After that, for a couple of weeks, the janitor seemed a lot different than before. He smiled whenever he saw me, and he would always say, "Hi, Jenny." I would always say hi right back to him. Some of the other kids made fun of me for talking to him and joked that the janitor must have a crush on me. I just ignored them. People saying mean things never really bothered me at all. A few weeks after, I had the first talk with the janitor personally. I brought him more flowers from the schoolyard. This time when I handed them to him and he thanked me, he said something else. "Hey, do you want to see where I keep all the daisies you bring me?" As he asked me this, I of course nodded and told him yes. I was pretty interested. He then told me to follow him. He led me down to the janitor's closet, which was a bit down the hall. He opened the door and turned on the light. I had given him quite a lot of flowers over the past 5 or 6 weeks. It seemed like every single one of them was in there, somehow. He also had my school picture as well. Who knows how he got it in the first place. It was hanging up on the wall by the vase that was overstuffed with dying flowers. For the first time, I was actually a bit concerned about this guy. Before I could even say anything to him, though, the janitor grabbed me and pushed me back into the room. I fell down on my knees. He flicked the light off, and for some reason closed the door behind him. I heard it lock from the outside, and I began to panic like any 10-year-old girl would in such a situation. I began screaming and crying at the top of my lungs. I ran over to the door and began pounding on it with my tiny fists and kicking it with my feet. Tears began to flow down my face. The only fortunate thing about the situation was that I was too young to have any idea what he really wanted from me. In that moment, it was likely that I was only in that closed closet for a few minutes, but it seemed like an eternity. Eventually, I heard the key in the door, and the door was opened. Outside was the school principal and the gym teacher. Apparently, a few kids had seen him shove me into the closet and ran to get the principal right away. The principal took me by the hand and told me that he would take me to the nurse's office to call my parents. The gym teacher had the janitor by the collar and was told to take him to the principal's office and call the police right away. I was okay in the end. My mom and dad were so pissed, though. They demanded the man be fired right away and put in jail. Obviously, he was fired and I never saw him again after. I have no idea if he went to jail, though. To this day, my parents won't tell me anything else about the incident, likely to protect me. I was a toddler, no more than 3 years old, when my family and I lived in a small rented house in Vermont. There are a few things I remember about it. The spiral staircase, the large field outside. Well, my 3-year-old self thought it was quite large at least, and the cold cement floor in my bedroom. The part of the house that I was most strangely drawn to, though, was the basement. I was and still am quite a wanderer, so I didn't really mind being alone. Both of those qualities made the basement a sort of getaway for me. I wasn't allowed to be down there by myself, technically, but a handful of times I managed to sneak my way down without anyone else noticing. I remember crawling down the stairs like they were a ladder or something, being overly cautious of falling, as I'd done so before. Sometimes while going down, I would hear this mumbling coming from somewhere in the basement, but it was too quiet for anything they said to be discernible. When I got to the last step and turned around, I would see her over in the corner. It was a sort of mannequin with blonde hair and an expressionless face. At least it seemed to be. All I could think is that this thing looked like the mannequins from J.T. Penney, or perhaps Camet. I had never once thought this was an odd thing to be there. Some basements have exercise equipment. We had a mannequin. So what? Years later, and living in a different home, I suddenly got the urge to bring this up to my mother. Honey, why would we have a store mannequin in our basement? Randomly, my mother gave me a strange look and laughed. We've never once owned a mannequin in any of the places we lived in. I was stunned. To this day, I have no idea who that was that I saw in the basement. I just don't know what to make of it. I went to college in a historic mid-sized city in Florida, and at the time lived in a duplex downtown, maybe about 3 blocks from campus or so. The city is known to be pretty safe, and I lived in a pretty decent area with large historic homes near me. It took place about 3 years ago. A little backstory that will become relevant. The duplex I lived in had a front door that locked, and then both the upstairs and downstairs units had their own locking door as well. I lived downstairs and had 2 roommates, but this specific night only one of my roommates was home. We knew the girls that lived upstairs, but really only spoke to them in passing. When they moved in, we emphasized how important it was to us for them to keep the main front door locked at all times. They always made sure to do a really good job of doing so. So, me and my roommate are in for the night knowing the front door is locked and smoking a few joints. At some point, we hear a knock at the front door and quickly realize the girls upstairs must have ordered a pizza. Later on, we came to find that they'd forgotten to lock the front door again after receiving that pizza. So, we finally go to sleep in our own rooms. Since I had a queen bed, I would often sleep with my phone and laptop right next to me in my bed. A couple of hours after I'd initially fallen asleep, I was suddenly woken up by something I didn't recognize at first. As I came to realize there was a man standing over my bed as soon as I realized I was not dreaming. I noticed he was quickly moving my phone and computer off of my bed and moving my comforter as well, trying to climb in. I've come for him. I started asking the man who he was, what he's doing here. I was extremely confused and still groggy. I was also still slightly high from before I'd gone to sleep. The only thing he said to me multiple times was that he was just trying to get into bed. At this point, I began to panic as my mind obviously went right to the worst. I was hoping that maybe my roommate had invited some random Tinder guy over and he'd simply gone to the wrong room. But the more I tried to question him, all he had to say was that he was going to get into bed with me. I did own pepper spray and a stun gun, but I had left them on a shelf that the man was right in front of, so there was no way I would be able to grab them without escalating the situation. Realizing I needed to do something quickly, I blurted out, "There are 5 people who live in this house, and if you don't get the out right now, I will scream. They'll be here in seconds." Luckily, that was all it took to scare the man off. I don't know if he brought something with him or if he stole something from me, but I did see him grab at something in the dark and run out of my room. As soon as he left, I shut the door and locked it and tried to find my phone. I couldn't find it anywhere. That I quickly realized that between my room and the front door was the room of my friend that was still home. As scared as I was in that moment, I was even more terrified that maybe the man had gone into her room. I grabbed my stun gun and my knife, counted to 3, and ripped open the door. I burst into my roommate's room only to find her fast asleep. There was no evidence of the man still being around. I quickly woke her up and told her what happened, and she asked me if I was sure I wasn't dreaming. I even began to question myself until I walked out of her room and saw our front door wide open. I went to my room to search for my phone and finally found it hidden under a pile of clothes across the room from where I had left it earlier. That sent a chill up my spine as I immediately knew for a fact someone had been in my house and room while I was sleeping, at least long enough to take and hide my phone. That only worsened my suspicions of his intentions. I ran back to my roommate's room, who at this point believed me. We barricaded ourselves in and called 911. Within minutes there were cars swarming our street and yard, and they yelled for us to quickly leave the residence and run towards them. At least a dozen officers came rushing in and searched every inch of our apartment. We woke up the girls upstairs and searched their apartment as well to ensure the man had well and truly left. The officers had me write a statement, and I gave them a description of the man. To this day, I've never heard a single thing about the case. I just feel incredibly lucky with the outcome of the situation. The thought of his intentions terrifies me, though, and additionally the fact he was never caught scares me. I would hate for anyone to have to go through the pure fear I did. I will add there was a chance he might have been on drugs or mentally ill and perhaps had no bad intentions. However, because he was never caught, I'll never be able to know with the fact that he tried to hide my phone. I can only assume the worst. If you were to ask me if I believed in the paranormal, I'd tell you that I'm on the fence about it. And I'm on the fence about it. If someone were to tell me a house is haunted, I wouldn't believe them unless I myself experience something out of the ordinary. I believe that creepy things do happen, but I go into situations with the mindset of trying to rule out every possible cause before I come to a conclusion. If I can write something off as just a coincidence or my mind playing tricks on me, then I will, and I'll leave it at that. This experience, though, is a little bit different. I don't know what exactly happened really, and it hasn't happened for a while since either. This night I was on a Discord call with some of my friends. It was pretty late at night, maybe 10 or 11 or so, and I decided I'd start doing my nightly routine and get settled in for the night while on call. I muted myself and went to brush my teeth, got my pillows all set up on my bed, and went to close my blinds by my window. That was when I noticed something odd. There appeared to be a man just standing in the street under a street lamp. I couldn't really make out his face because of the distance, despite nothing really obscuring it. The man was wearing a suit. He wasn't particularly tall, and I don't know what really stood out about him, other than it being odd to see him there so late at night. Something about him was just giving me a really off feeling. I unmuted myself and sat back down at my desk, letting my friends know about this. I was joking about how his Uber was late, or maybe his partner had kicked him out, or something. We all gave him the very creative nickname of Suitman. After a few moments, I went back to the window to check if the man had moved at all. The man had indeed moved. He was now standing right in front of my cross-street neighbor's backyard gate, which was visible from where I was due to it being located near their garage door. And 5 Davgid. The longer I looked at him, the more odd things I started to notice. First of all, he was not facing the gate, and he was standing completely still. Second, I noticed he was so still that he hadn't even triggered the neighbor's floodlights, which usually come on automatically when someone or something moves nearby. Either that or they'd already gone off. You had to cross over their driveway to get to the gate, so if he just moved there, the light should have been on. At this point, I was really unsettled, but also a little bit intrigued. I decided to grab my phone and try to take a picture of this man. When I turned back to look at where the person had been, though, even though I'd only looked away for a moment to grab my phone and open the camera, the man was already gone, vanished into the night. I decided, forget this, and closed my blinds immediately. I stayed on that voice chat most of the night since I was still a little freaked out. I didn't want to try going to sleep anytime soon after such a strange encounter, although all of that was pretty creepy on its own. The scariest part came after. For a few months following this, I would hear someone whistling while walking down the street at the exact same time of night. I'd seen the man each and every day. It stopped recently, and I haven't heard it since, nor have I seen the Suitman again. But I'm hoping that will be the end of it. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you have a story you'd like to send in or you want to reach out for any reason, check the links to my social media in the description below, including Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter. Go ahead and send me a message and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. If you do decide to submit a story, please include in the subject line the name of the story, if it has one, what kind of story it is, and how you'd like to be credited. Make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable sharing, and try to use proper grammar to give your story the best chance of being featured in a future video. That's pretty much it for now, guys. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a great day.